to this panel discussion, Drilling Down with Data, the DTC Commerce Opportunity, as part of the Drum's Great Data Reckoning Deep Dive in partnership with BML Commerce. I'm Jenny Baker, Assistant Editor at the Drum, and today I'm delighted to be joined by two fantastic speakers. They are Nick Walsh, Chief Executive Officer of BML Commerce, MENA, and Karima Berkani, Group Head of Brand at Jumia Group, Africa's leading e-commerce platform. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Now, direct to consumer or DTC commerce is increasingly becoming more important in brand marketing strategies, and in more cases, more so than the big brand building campaigns. But how is data driving brand DTC commerce strategies, and how important is the role it plays? Today, I'm going to lean into the experts to find out how brands are leveraging data to further strengthen their comms and channel planning, and question whether there's such a thing as brands having too much data, that it has the opposite effect on their ambition and marketing objectives. We've seen brands shift their D2C commerce strategies towards varied online channels as a primary focus. However, now things have started to open up. I wonder, have you seen a shift back towards offline channels and alternative commerce strategies put in place?
You are seeing a lot of brands trying to sort out a D2C strategy, particularly online. So that's something that we've also seen at Jumia. We have what we call official stores, which are basically shop-in-shops that are online, dedicated to brands. And even this year, we've seen a considerable uptake in the number of brands who are interested in launching them. For example, in Nigeria, we launched Nike, Mango, and Converse just in Q3. We're really seeing that interest coming from FMCG brands, whereas now we're starting to see players in other categories hop onto that trend as well.
They weren't getting people into stores. They needed to think of other ways to reach the consumers and to drive purchase. And obviously, there was a huge shift, but that reactiveness often meant that brands weren't really thinking about commerce holistically. They were thinking about, how do I quickly react? How do I drive sales? How do I reach consumers in the new place they are? And so obviously, that was quite revolutionary at the time. And obviously, it peaked. And the other problem is that a lot of brands couldn't necessarily deliver on that promise. So direct-to-consumer sounds good in principle, but what if the product doesn't reach the consumer? What if it doesn't reach them on time? What if it doesn't reach them when it's damaged? There's a lot of the variables. So when there's not a strategy in place and it's reactive, it can cause quite some problems. And as I mentioned previously in our conversation, the different categories are dependent on that as well. So certain categories move quite easily into direct-to-consumer. We've been using certain direct-to-consumer methods for years and years. If you think like the travel industry, for example. But if you think on things like luxury, where that physical experience is really quite important, that doesn't necessarily translate so quickly. So shoppers still crave, in our view, that physical interaction, specifically, as we said, things like clothing, trying things on. And so bricks and mortar still play a really important part of that process. With that shift and changing dynamics, again, we're seeing now a shift in strategic focus. So overall, commerce is becoming front and center, as you mentioned, Jenny. And now it's about building complete commerce campaigns. So we're seeing more of a hybrid approach. So it can still be direct to consumer, but we need to think about those different points and different moments within the strategy. And obviously it's data that drives that thinking and drives the approach.
See two different sets of behaviors from brands, those that are about self-preservation and defending their share of the market, or those that are innovating their way out of it. I guess I'm curious, how are each of you leading through this new explosion of innovation and change? And maybe Karima, you come to you first.
Yeah, sure. So I think at Jumia, we in a way are doing a bit of both. So we are the market leader in a lot of our markets, the first e-commerce player in market. But at the same time, very much we have, I think, a collective sense that we're never really done innovating. We did start 2020 in a really good place in the sense we are e-commerce. We're able to help other brands, find their footing online. And as a marketplace, we do have contactless payment. We had a lot of things that were to our advantage. But at the same time, we did face a host of challenges that were new to any business through 2020. Which included, for example, shifting our product mix. So whereas before we were focused and known more for electronics and phones, we really moved more towards essential goods and FMCG through 2020. For a sense of the scale, in 2019, fashion, beauty, and FMCG accounted for 44% of our GMV, whereas in 2022, it was accounting for 57%. We also saw a lot of challenges in terms of a lot of new customers coming online, maybe different variations in terms of how tech savvy someone is, and how do you aim your communications at both consumers who could be millennials, very tech savvy, as well as others who are significantly less tech savvy or have less access to internet and these things. So we found ourselves on one hand creating billboards that had our call to order number on them, or for example, our Black Friday campaign that focused around a couple getting a notification from Jumia on their phone, and then boom, a department store popped up in their living room, which was really great because on one hand, we were able to explain what we're doing as a brand. And on the other hand, we leaned into, music and fun lyrics and things like that to be able to also appeal to a millennial audience.
Great. And Nick, how are you leading clients through this change?
I think that's the benefit we have as VMO and our commerce. We work, more traditionally maybe in the FMCG space. That might be what people would associate the word commerce or e-commerce with. But then across a really broad spectrum of FMCGs and then into completely different categories we work with marketplaces like Jumia. We work in the automotive sector, we work with tech, with social companies. And commerce is really high on everyone's list. So for us, we're in a really good place to kind of get a broad view of what's happening, really have a look and see maybe there's something we can compare in automotive to FMCG, for example. There's learnings that can be taken. And really what we're seeing is it's either brands who are strong online, looking at much more physical presence, or vice versa. And for us, it's quite individualistic, but there's great learnings we can take. At the core of it, what's always important is that brands are putting consumers first. They're looking at moments that matter. And we come from a kind of a shopper marketing background where really it was all about understanding why people buy and how they buy. And obviously that's still absolutely critical. We look at those journeys and we look at then the number of places that people can buy is crazy. So if you think about it now, we're all shoppers, we all buy things. You can buy from your bed, you can buy during your run, you can buy during dinner. If you're not that engaged with the people you're at dinner with, you can buy everywhere. And I think that requires kind of real deep understanding. And that's where innovation can happen. So we do a lot of work in what we call creative commerce. So it's looking at those kind of breakthrough ways. If someone's going to buy for a marketplace, how do we make it much easier for them to buy? And I think that's where you can really innovate now in the space. Commerce isn't just restricted to a screen or a store. You can buy pretty much anywhere, always on.
Absolutely. And, what's become clear is that brands will keep shoppers in their ecosystem by really understanding the role and the interaction of channels and touch points they use, and how they can leverage them for maximum efficiency and effectiveness. Having the right touch points to draw from and channels to leverage is the first step to creating a human commerce ecosystem that every brand needs. So what human touch points have kept you engaged this year? And, and what brands have impressed you personally?
I'll go first on this one because I think obviously we keep a good eye on what brands are doing, and it's a fairly common thread. I think we've seen some brilliant work, kind of purposeful work where brands have gone out to support shoppers. We look at some of the kind of health brands, we look at the Lifebuoys and the Detol's of this world. They've really moved into this space where they're actually helping to protect shoppers and make that shopping easy. I think, it's quite a common thread through this. Making life easier or more convenient and making it easy to purchase really is the thread that goes through it. It's not necessarily about human, it's about everything. It's about the entire ecosystem. Everything needs to be human, whether it's an online purchase or an offline purchase. It's got to be rooted in deep human insight. And that obviously is where the data becomes really important. So every touch point, as I mentioned, can have a human element to it. So for us, it's about finding then the right creative solution. It's about understanding how do we provide the very best experience there that's right for the brand that we're working for, that's right for the moment, and right to obviously drive a purchase ultimately, because we are still trying to drive a sale. For us, it's that combination, blending creativity, blending data, blending that kind of human element to really deliver on the brand's best self. So again, if you look at things like the Adidas flagship stores, for example, they're the very best portrait of what that brand can be offline. Incredible, multifaceted, engaging hybrid experiences, but then they have their direct-to-consumer and ways they can purchase online as well. So I think it's becoming more and more important, human in every aspect of everything we do, whether that be on or offline.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question because it's kind of this flirtation that happens right between the intangible digital space and, it's kind of more real, tangible space. So especially in e-commerce, it's an interesting thing because you're linking both of those spaces. And I think where we have seen success is, in terms of one, understanding our consumers and knowing shopping is seen, for example, as a social activity, or the value of that interaction between a vendor that they would frequent, or, whether it's a store that they just enjoy going to, or it's a butcher, understanding those relationships. And also the element of making sure that you feel good about where you're spending your money. So I think a lot of it for us has been, how do you create these experiences digitally? So for example, by creating, live shopping experiences, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram. We've also seen exponential growth through influencer market as a channel through the last year and a half. And I think it's also, Nick, what you pointed on in terms of purpose is quite interesting, because as all of your favorite brands move online, it's no longer enough to exist online, right? It's really about being able to answer that question, why? And I think a lot of brands in the US had quite interesting 2020 in that space. And the expectation was very clearly that a brand not only had to comment, had to have a position on it, and had to be able to show what action they were going to take on any given subject. I think, a number of brands did a great job in that sense. Target is one that comes top of mind, from creating FOMO content, the sounds of Target, the sound of the racks or the shopping carts, just in terms of snackable content, but then also in terms of making investments in terms of helping their communities or showcasing minority sellers on their platforms.
Just to build, I think you make a really good point. We're talking about humans change. Human insights change all the time. People were at home. People were comfortable shopping in 20 different places, getting things delivered all the time. They're at home. They're ready to get. They have time to do that. Now that things are changing all the time, and obviously that's the big advantage of data. A brand like Jumia can obviously understand those shopping habits and change as well. So it becomes critically important to understand data, change quickly with the times, and understand those human insights.
Absolutely. It's really interesting. So I guess to really drill down to the data now, Nick, this is probably one for you, really. How are agencies aggregating data and further using it to help brands with their commerce strategies? Are there any specific tools that you have internally that support that process?
Yes, yeah. Look, I think agencies have to be really clear in understanding the data. We have a specialist data team, both in our office and then data teams globally. And more clients are asking for our help, not necessarily to mine the data, but help to pull the right insights, to help to pull those truths, and to help to build campaigns based on data. We no longer also have the luxury to kind of sit and wait and say, hey, where's the data? We need to see the data. We also have a duty and a role as part of the WPP group, part of the BMLY&R and Commerce group. We sit on a lot of data ourselves. So the perfect brief won't always come with the perfect amount of data that a client will not share with us. We have to link to the media partners, we have to link to the PR partners, and provide our own sources of data and insights. Sometimes those insights might not necessarily come from client data. So for us, we play a really important role there. So again, we have to have social listening capabilities. We have to connect all the dots together. That's what our strategic teams do. And as a result, our understanding, as I mentioned, working across categories, an insight might come from another category. We thought about this, or data might come from a completely different data set the client might have. We have to understand the why, the what, the when, and the how. So we develop that ourselves. And we have an internal tool, which I think we've spoken about on the drum before, called the Living Commerce Platform. It's our own platform which runs globally. And it aggregates all of our data, it maps opportunities, it pinpoints those. I talked about those key moments that matter, and it helps us develop and purchase decision journeys. And then that dives into customer experiences and helps us to build experiences. So we have a complete platform that we work around the world with that.
Karima, obviously as a brand owner, what kind of data do you believe is most important when it comes to an online marketplace such as Jumia? You've got things like, the audience, how they shop, brands they shop, basket spend. How do you prioritize when there's so much data at hand, especially in the case of a retail season like Black Friday?
You're absolutely right. It is actually overwhelming, the amount of data that is out there, whether you're looking from, a paid OM perspective, or even, the user data that an e-commerce platform would have in terms of shopping habits of their own consumers. I think big picture areas we don't want to lose sight of is, health of the funnel, right? So making sure that the life cycle and the funnel is, healthy and where it should be. But you also need to be able to augment those kind of metrics with consumer insights as well. Being able to always make sure you're having those focus groups and having those discussions so you're able to inform your strategy and the direction that you want to move and invest in. Understanding consumers is going to be an increasing trend moving forward, just because touching base on what we're saying in terms of this human element of branding moving forward, I think the expectation more and more is going to be for personalized experiences. And in order to be able to deliver on those, obviously, you're going to have to really understand your consumers and have the data there. Is there such a thing as too much data, or can it be limiting from a creative perspective? I think that's always kind of a healthy tension that exists when you're going to kick off a big campaign, for example, like Black Friday. You'll have a creative team who sky's the limits. They really want to think outside of the box and be creative. We have, a wealth of insights that we have from, say, Google or YouTube in terms of what we know is going to convert. What are those best practices? And then we have also ultimately as a brand, what message we want to put out there. So I think ultimately when those worlds collide and all of our data points and our focus points come together, there's a really healthy tension that lands you on better and stronger creative and ultimately better performing campaigns. And of course, being able to use data to steer a campaign as you go and see what is working and what isn't working, to be able to pivot is also something that's really hugely important in today's world.
I completely agree on some of the things Karima said there. I think the problem isn't having too much data, it's about how to use it, because ultimately that data is a never-ending tap. It continues to come in, and we spoke about the fact that actually some of the data is relevant now and maybe not as relevant in the future. So, data's been around forever, obviously much more advancement in kind of ways we store it, how we analyze it, how we use it. The ease of access has become more than ever. And obviously that can override maybe experience, marketing experience, or even kind of people's gut feel. But data shouldn't always be the thing completely driving decisions. As I said, we've seen massive changes in consumer behavior. Sometimes that data won't give you that. Yeah. So it's not the only thing we always need to take into consideration. I think that's the thing, as an agency partner, we really do that. So it can fragment things too much. It can be a kind of never-ending vicious cycle of issues and opportunities. So it's really, really important that we come back to that idea of how to use it and how to read it. So knowing what to do with data really is the most important thing. Data is the mean, it's not always the end goal.
Well said. And you've touched a lot on consumer behavior kind of driving this, but what are some of the key trends you're seeing in the run up to and for brand planning and comms in 2022?
We touched on this at the beginning. So I think, we're still seeing a shift. Karima talks about the group, right? So I think there's still too much of a subject out there around e-commerce. And I think, there's been a lot of discussion around potentially it's time to drop the E, because actually what we need to do is look at commerce in totality, so front and center. And I think that's really a big move for 2022. And I think brands that start to think commerce in totality are the ones that are going to win. It's kind of top of everyone's agenda. It's everyone's favorite subject, and everyone wants commerce talent, and everyone wants commerce expertise, and everyone wants commerce people. But actually, it's also the hot potato. It's kind of one of these things that kind of sits in the responsibility of management. It sits in sales. It sits in marketing. It sits in customer. It sits in trade. It sits everywhere, commerce. But no one really wants to take complete responsibility. It's quite fragmented. In many cases, it's actually a media conversation when it comes to commerce. The move into 2022, as I said, is that approach to kind of let's move away from e-commerce and start talking about commerce in totality. Direct to consumer falls within a commerce strategy. Direct to consumer can be used at the right human moment when the data informs that that's what's needed. You don't necessarily need direct to consumer if it's not required. So my prediction is that we move from e-commerce into talking about commerce, and that brands that start to put that complete commerce view and really look at human interaction and where people buy and look at demand, they're the ones that will win. And as Karima said, that will drive this kind of personalized human experiences that we're seeing, so that people are so demanding. And that's where, again, where I believe the successful brands will thrive in the commerce sphere in 2022.
I love that. It's time to drop the E from e-commerce. Karima, what trends are you seeing? And if you could give us one prediction for what brands should be doing now or in the future to drive their DTC strategies, what would that be?
So I think there's a few interesting things that are at play. So we touched a bit on the continued acceleration of online as a channel, right? There's a bit of a correction versus 2020, but it's obviously something here to stay, and that a lot of brands are going to try to figure out. I think it's going to be more around the experience for 2022. So it's not enough to just be online. It's not enough to be existing kind of online as a utility. What is your delivery experience like? What is that touch point with the driver in terms of delivery times? What is your accuracy? How are you interacting, in terms of transparency? Consumers didn't always have the luxury to, say, shop at a more expensive place than they typically would have, or shop at a place because it's aligned with their beliefs. Again, we were shopping out of necessity online, shopping at a number of different places, whether it be online or offline. I think that we're going to see, in addition to that consumer experience and customer service piece, we're also going to see people shopping more in brands that are aligned with their values, or in businesses that they feel have a purpose that's aligned with their core values.
Wonderful. I think for brands to unlock the DTC commerce opportunity, there's definitely this balance. As you've both said, everyone needs data. Data plays a huge role to inform and guide, but don't let it overcomplicate a smart, creative commerce idea. And keep the human interaction alive. Nick, I love what you said. Data is a means to an end. By blending creativity, data, technology, and humanity, brands can intuitively show up in the right moments and create experiences, not just to make a sale, but to inspire conversations too. So look, thank you. We're running out of time, but I just want to say a big thank you to both of you, Karima and Nick, for an inspiring conversation around the D2C commerce opportunity. And a big thank you to the viewers for watching. Make sure to explore the Great Data Reckoning Deep Dive Hub on the Drum website for this and more great content on all things data. We'll see you soon.